Hey, this is Brookes. I've got some time, I've got an idea, and I've got a cup of coffee. So let's forge a character. Let me just cover my bases really quick. This is not the first time that I've done a character redesign or reimagining on this channel, and so I wanted to make a couple of things clear. First of all, I love Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong Land on the Game Boy was my first game ever, and when it came time to go to the store and get a second Game Boy game, I chose Donkey Kong Land 2, the second yellow cartridge. I'm also the person that bought both editions of Tropical Freeze because I love that game. I'm saying all this because a redesign or a reimagining of a character does not automatically mean there's any hatred of that character. This is simply an exercise that I'm doing for fun as a character designer. In my Crash video, I talked about a redesign coming from a place of dissatisfaction with the original designs. But with the DK characters, I'll describe sort of why I'm doing this or what my take is during the time lapse. I don't necessarily have a problem with them so much as a curiosity about their Ape-Beaks. Secondly, and this really goes for anything that I make, I made this for fun and to share with people, not to get unsolicited feedback and criticism from people that I don't know. That might sound really entitled and petty as a viewer, but if you're on my end of things, after getting just tons and tons of comments that aren't really like from the haters or death threats, thanks for that one, by the way, but really more along the lines of just odd and insufferable sort of attempts to help or be involved in the process. Sometimes, like in my Why My Comic Failed video, which was meant as an object lesson and drawing on past experiences, people who heard me describe the comic to them that they'd never seen suddenly knew more about it than I did and thought they could be helpful that way. Maybe there was a problem with the marketing or my heart just wasn't in it. Girl, bye? You have to understand that sometimes these projects were finished months or years ago and I'll have already moved on to something else. This Donkey Kong project is done as far as I'm concerned, and I'll start on something new tomorrow, even though this wasn't necessarily perfect. But then someone stumbles across something today, has their first experience with it, and chimes in with what they feel is help. I'm not trying to police the way that anyone comments. What I am saying is that I am my own worst critic. I'm very interested in learning and improving, and when I do that, I go to qualified sources who I can trust. One illustrator actually helped me clean up a few things on this Donkey Kong illustration. I don't necessarily go and crowdsource opinions that I don't necessarily know that I can trust. All that said, let's look at a Donkey Kong redesign. This redesign is covering Donkey Kong, Diddy Kong, Dixie Kong, and Cranky Kong. One of my main reasons for doing this redesign in the first place was I was interested in seeing a little bit of variation between these four characters, especially after Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze had you playing with all four. I thought it would be nice to see, first of all, a difference with the color of their fur, but also a little bit more variation in their proportions. And what's interesting about Donkey Kong Country apes, or the characters in general, some are apes, some are monkeys, is that they don't necessarily fit a completely specific race or species of ape or monkey that we find in the real world. That was kind of my main idea here, was to pull a little bit more influence for each of them from a distinct species of ape or monkey. So first off, you see Diddy Kong there, who I based off of some smaller monkeys, and I added a bit of a storytelling reason for why he has his hat. And then here you have Donkey Kong, who I just wanted to beef up a little bit more. I wanted to make larger, more imposing, and so him and Diddy Kong there, the storytelling addition that I made was that Diddy initially got his hat from Donkey Kong, and that was sort of the idea of him being a protege looking up to Donkey Kong, the idea of sort of him viewing him as a hero. Next up is Dixie Kong here. One of the main things about Dixie Kong that I wanted to sort of resolve or change is that basically she has a ponytail as part of her gameplay movement. She helicopters a ponytail there, but the hair and the hair on her head it looks kind of like a wig underneath her hat. And I thought, well, instead of making a monkey look like they have, or I guess gibbons are apes, I'm actually not positive there. Instead of making that just an additional blonde, wig on top of her, change her entire fur color to that blonde. And I based her primarily on gibbons, like I said. So allowing that hair to kind of be a natural part of her was my main thrust there. Next up is Cranky Kong, and in the lore of Donkey Kong, it's sort of suggested that the main Donkey Kong that we see is Donkey Kong Jr., and Cranky Kong is the original, back from the old Mario arcade cabinet. So I wanted to keep Cranky Kong as a gorilla, just a little bit similar to Donkey Kong. However, I took some liberties and thought, I like the idea of sort of the old man, the cranky gorilla being sort of red-faced, right, curmudgeonly. And so I went with the Japanese macaques, who are actually monkeys, who they're the ones who, if you've ever seen them bathing in the hot springs, they have gray hair and a very pink face. And I thought that was just a perfect sort of thing to throw in, some traits to throw in with Cranky Kong, because, you know, a red-faced old man with gray hair, I thought fit perfectly. And his cane I made just a little bit larger, kind of like a staff. Next up, I'm moving on here from those initial sketches to a layout, a composition that puts all 4 characters together. And so in here, I wanted a little bit of movement with each to make each of their silhouettes unique. And so that was another thing too. The shapes and sizes are a lot different between these. Really, if you want to get similar, I guess Donkey Kong and Cranky are the 2 gorillas, and Dixie and Diddy are the 2 monkeys or smaller apes. So those sets of pairs are similar, but overall just a little bit different than in the original lineup. You have Donkey Kong, who's fairly large, and then the other 3 being about the same size, proportion, and shape. Speaking of size and proportion and things, one thing that my redesign here doesn't admittedly handle so well is gameplay. That wasn't something that I thought of too much. And so to swap out sort of the original models that are in the games with characters that are this size would be a fairly big change. What I do like about the original Donkey Kong is that he's sort of rounded overall. He fits in a bounding box fairly well. Each part of him he's still bulky and strong, but is almost kind of, I want to say spherical, even though that doesn't really make so much sense, as it's just when you look at his overall silhouette, he can fit compactly fairly well. And, you know, there's rolls and things that he does in the game. So gameplay-wise, these characters would need a little bit of extra work to really fit into a game. Otherwise, the game would have to kind of change around the characters. That's another thing, too, is that characters are designed with a purpose, and so, you know, that has to be taken into account when gameplay is first. That's the way that Nintendo operates. As far as the actual illustration here, I moved from those initial sketches to a bit of cleaned up line work, even though my intention with this is to go lineless and render this out as sort of an illustrated final product. What you see me doing here is laying out the base color, and then as an initial step, I laid a red multiply layer over top of the entirety of the illustration and used a soft brush to erase some of that away. However, what I ended up doing was instead using several multiply layers with this blue color here and using a lot sharper shadows, a lot stronger ones, adding a lot of ambient occlusion for one thing, in places where usually a line is able to give you a distinction between 2 elements that are the same color, like say where Donkey Kong's arm that's closest to us is intercepting his body. So adding that ambient occlusion with a multiply layer was a big help. I also duplicated my base colors and darkened the one over top, and then erased away from it with that light source, which was another way to add some definition and some depth to it as well. You also see me adding some glow there, some rim lighting, and a shadow that's cast underneath the characters, as well as a background that fits the sort of tropical mood of the characters. We have the final reveal of the illustration here. This was a lot of fun to do. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you can understand sort of some of my thinking process behind the redesign. If you'd like to support me in this channel, you can go to patreon.com/bageldenizen and support me there. Also, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch at bageldenizen. Thank you so much for watching, and have fun creating.